It's going to be difficult to leave all these wonderful angels. Thank you. Not just the people who sing. Oh, I must say Mantra Devi still looks like a teenager. But all of you. My great consolation is that I'm going to live with many angels in India too. We have a wonderful group here, and it's a joy having you. I never wanted to be a composer, so it never meant anything to me. I never wanted to be a photographer, so that never meant anything to me. But I did want to be a playwright, and I gave it up because I didn't know truth and didn't know how to express truth to people. So it is a satisfaction that I have been able to write 2 plays that do express truth, and I'm grateful to God. They're not mine, but at least that satisfied that desire. It's my last day in public today. Tomorrow I do have a function with the Sevaka order, and then Tuesday I leave. And it's wonderful that so many of you have come from all around the country. It's been a great fulfillment for me. I don't know if I'll be able to come back, but I must say I've been feeling very well, and so who knows? If I can come every year, why not? So that is not a promise. There was a Spartan general where the Persians invaded Greece, and the Persian general or king, emperor, whatever he was, sent a long letter to the Spartan general threatening what he would do to him when he had beaten him. And the Spartan general, they were people of very few words. He wrote back a message with just one word, if. And in fact, the Spartans won, the Persians lost, and that was the whole story of the marathon run and all of that. You know all of that story, I'm sure. Anyway, if I can, I would like to, and since I would like to, I hope I can. And since I hope I can, perhaps I will. But that depends. So let's begin the service. This beautiful prayer of Master's, he also made it a chant. Often people think, why, with so much suffering in the world, doesn't God answer more? The answer is he can't come in if you won't let him. If you are clutching your sorrow and suffering and pain and trials and whatever they may be, and everybody goes through them, if you clutch them to yourself, then you've closed the door on his compassion. It's not that he doesn't feel compassion, but he's left outside, knocking perhaps, but unheard. So whenever you go through difficult trials, sorrows, tragedies even, open your heart to God. You will find, and I say this with personal, absolute conviction based on experience, that by turning to him, you will see he is there. He listens, and even the most difficult circumstances in your life turn to joy. That is what the teachings are all about. I would like to read from Rays of the One Light. How devotees arise. I'll wait till you finish. Thank you. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Last week we asked the question, why do devotees fall? And we considered the downfall of Judas in this context. Jesus, in answer to Judas's criticism for allowing Mary to rub his feet with spikenard, a very costly ointment, said, the poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always. Jesus is saying here that there is one response in justice that needs, one supreme injustice that needs eradication. Poverty, yes, but not of a material kind. Poverty above all in a spiritual sense. Divine blessings are not common in this world. They are extraordinary. When they come, we should give them priority above every other consideration. Never allow a moment of divine joy, for instance, to be set aside for lesser, quote, duties. Divine attunement is our highest priority. As Lahiri Mahashaya, the guru of Yogananda's guru, said, to listen to the heart's inner sound, Om, which issues from the very center of our being, is man's highest duty. Mary, on this occasion, was not communing in inner silence with Christ's Spirit, as she had been when Martha urged that she be reproached by Jesus for not helping out in the kitchen. Mary this time was serving outwardly, but in a very different spirit from the restless fussing for which Jesus had reprimanded her sister Martha. Those who see a radical difference between the paths of action and meditation should understand this distinction. To serve in the right spirit is necessary, for only thereby can we overcome our karmic tendencies toward restless activity. The important thing is that spirit be always inwardly focused, that in everything we do, we act in loving service to the Lord. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says in the 3rd chapter, the state of freedom from action, that is, of eternal rest in the spirit, cannot be achieved without activity. No one, by mere renunciation and outward non-involvement, can attain perfection. Whenever the Spirit of God descends upon you, however, remember the words of Jesus, Me ye have not always with you. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. I remember once at Mount Washington, I'd been there only a few months, and I used to set my food aside in the dining room and then go upstairs and meditate for half an hour and come back and have my lunch. It was usually cold, but that didn't matter. I remember one day I was sitting there and all of a sudden this great joy came over me. And it was so natural. This is the thing. When Patanjali defined enlightenment, he defined it by the word smriti, memory. You remember that that is who you are. You go into meditation, you feel this joy, you feel this love, and you think, well, of course. And so I was young and stupid, and I thought, well, of course, it seemed so natural. I thought I could never lose it again. So I figured, well, my lunch is cold already, but I better eat it before I have to go back to work. And so I went and ate it, and I didn't get that joy again for quite a while. When you got any touch of God's presence, hang on to it. That should be your priority over everything else. I remember one time, because work, of course, is an important part of our lives. We have service to render. We have many things to do. But one time when Master was building the towers in Encinitas, is the entrance there, and one of the disciples, Bernard, was very hard. He did a lot of work, plastering and so on, but the last day there was still a lot of work to be done, and the reporters and the big opening and all sorts of things were happening the day after, and Bernard didn't come. And when he finally appeared, Master said, "Where were you?" Bernard said, "I was meditating, sir." Master immediately said, "Oh, all right." You see, even at that important moment when he had that desire to meditate, that was a priority. I'm not giving you a way out. Please don't. Please understand this with some reason. I don't want you never coming to work while I'm meditating. Still, when that desire is there, when you feel particularly impelled toward communion, then make that your priority. I'd like to read two passages from the New Gita. One, it's actually a lovely thing. He gives different alternatives. For those, this is in chapter 12, verses 6 to 11. For those who venerate only me, offering to me all their actions, and with their minds concentrated on me by yoga practice, and their hearts' feelings uplifted to me in devotion, such devotees I rescue from the ocean of mortality. Immerse your consciousness in me alone. Direct all your discrimination toward finding me. Then, beyond any doubt, you shall come to me. O Dhananjaya Arjuna, if you cannot absorb your thoughts in the contemplation of me, then practice the techniques of yoga, which are intended to help develop concentration. If, however, you find yoga practice too difficult, then perform all actions in the thought of me. By this means, too, you shall achieve final success. He might have put it also, you shall achieve success finally. Excuse me. But if, even during activity, you cannot think of me, then give me your intentions. Ever striving to discipline your mind, offer to me the fruits of your every labor. In the commentary I say, Sir Edwin Arnold puts it beautifully in his much-loved and deservedly so paraphrase, the song Celestial. His translation of this passage is, But if in this thy faint heart fails, if in this thy faint heart fails, bring me thy failure. As Yogananda gave the counsel earlier in this book to give God even one's mistakes, so he would give the counsel to give one's failures to God. It is the intention that counts. Every thought that is uplifted to the Lord becomes purified and strengthened in time. No amount of restlessness can define anyone as he is at the present. Regarding attunement with the Guru, also Paramhansa Yogananda said, If you shut me out, how can I come in? The glass that is turned upside down cannot receive the drink that might fill it. The first step toward receiving divine blessings is to hold oneself in readiness for the moment when those blessings are poured. Indeed, the blessings are there, ever waiting, if the vessel of our consciousness is upturned to receive them. I want also to read to you, Even the worst of sinners can, with the raft of wisdom, cross safely over the ocean of delusion. Krishna offers this supreme encouragement to all humanity. No matter how steeped you are in bad habits, vice, self-degrading depravity, or evil, you are still a child of the one infinite Lord, who created masters and saints. Nothing less than divine bliss can define you forever. Never, therefore, tell yourself, I am evil. Never say, I have failed. If you accept any failure as your reality, it will be so, at least for this time, this lifetime. But if, after every setback, you say rather, I have not yet succeeded, you can win even in this incarnation. Pray to God as the Divine Mother, all-forgiving and ever-accepting Mother, whether naughty or good, I am thy child. Thou must release me, cleanse me of all sin. God doesn't mind your faults, Yogananda used to say. He only minds your indifference. The real poverty, the contrast has to be made. That in this country there's a lot of wealth, but there's a lot of poverty also, poverty of spirit. And in India, where there is much more poverty, there's also much more wealth of spirit. And I do not mean that on every street corner you'll find a saint in India. There's a lot of tamoguna, a lot of Shudras, a lot of lower consciousness. There are all kinds of consciousness, but there is more instinctive response to divine inspiration there than in this country. I am very happy to see and to be able to declare that Yogananda's coming here in 1920 has changed this country. You and I are a part of that change. I remember how desperate I was to know truth. I didn't know what it was, and I couldn't find anybody who knew anything. And I used to think, but I couldn't find God by thinking. And when I came upon Autobiography of a Yogi, I said, this is for me. Just like that. It was my good fortune and my good karma that the very day that I found that book, I had put my mother on the ship to join my father in Cairo, Egypt, where he had been posted for work. Because had she been there, it was so new to me that she might have, and I know she would have tried to, talk me out of it. A week before I met Yogananda, I had never heard words like karma and dharma and yoga and guru, and so many words that nowadays are common parlance. I'd never heard them. I knew nothing about it. The only philosophy of India that we got was 20 minutes in the first class in the history of philosophy at Haverford College. I just didn't know. I loved Emerson, I loved Thoreau, and I realized later that they'd been greatly influenced by the Vedanta philosophy. But apart from that, I'd had to sort of wing it alone, and I'd been thinking and thinking. But when I read that book, it was just it. I couldn't accept the miracles, I have to admit. I had to put them on a shelf because I couldn't match them to my own experience of life. But I accepted him. Here was the first man I had ever met, even though it was only in the pages of a book, who had what I wanted. And I took the next bus across the country, 4 days and 4 nights, nearly 3,000 miles. And the first words I addressed to him were words I would never have dreamed of saying to anybody, because I didn't think anybody had what I wanted. But when I met him, my first words were, I want to be your disciple. And I have never backed off from those words. Whatever I saw in that book, whatever I read in him, whatever inspiration I felt from him, I found again and again corroborated more and more. And finally, these miracles themselves, I found so many miracles in his presence, I could just accept them. But the change that he has wrought in this country are far more than most people can appreciate. You know, many people think, well, how can we help to change the world? You're not going to help it by getting out there and doing a lot of things, nearly so much. I don't mean don't do anything, but understand that the real thing that will help people is change of consciousness. St. John of the Cross said that one act of divine love, that is to say, one impulse of divine love for God, does more good for the whole church and the whole humanity than all the pious deeds of all these priests and monks and nuns. The most important thing we can do is commune with God, and then in His name and thinking of Him, try to serve others, understanding that we can't do it, but He can do it. As long as there's the thought of we, you take that great ocean and reduce it to a tiny little straw. How much can that little straw produce of the power of the ocean? Assuming that power is not going to break the straw, it'll be a trickle. But when you can be in tune with Him, and this is what Yogananda showed to us, it was such a mighty force in His presence that honestly, I never got over the feeling that I was sitting in the presence of God. I remember one time he was talking about potholes that needed to be filled in the road in the driveway. And so I was not involved, that wasn't my work. So I just closed my eyes while he was speaking. And I felt so much joy coming over me that I knew that was his consciousness. He had to talk about these things. A saint has to do what has to be done. But his reality was what I felt inside. And so many times I don't know how it could be, but it was. I remember one time, I've told this story so many times, but it's well worth saying. I was there was a bar mitzvah in Beverly Hills. There are a lot of Jewish people in Beverly Hills. I'm not Jewish, but they asked me to, and a couple of representatives, to come from Mount Washington to give a demonstration of yoga postures. And so I did. Afterwards, I was talking with one of these Beverly Hills psychiatrists. Well, if you want to, you can't specify particularly anything of anyone, but if you want the epitome of an atheist, cynical atheist, it would be a Beverly Hills psychologist or a psychiatrist. And he challenged me about things that I was talking about and what I believed in and so on. And I tried to convince him by telling him of some of the miracles I had seen. And later I realized that in his mind he was thinking, let's see, I probably have an opening Wednesday morning. Probably thought I was completely crazy. It didn't do him any good at all. It probably did him harm. You can't cast your pearls before swine. I don't want to call him a swine. But I do say that people, if they're not ready to hear something, are injured more than helped by hearing it. Because when they need it, then their first thought is, oh, I've heard that one before. So it's better to hold it back until they need it, till they ask for it. Anyway, the interesting thing was that Master often had me serve lunch to his guests and then perform a few asanas afterwards, postures. And so I was up there. And after the guests left, he would often sit at the table alone with me and talk about things. And he was sitting there after the guests had left this day, 2 days or more afterwards. And he said, oh, by the way, when you're with materialist skeptics, don't talk about miracles. I said, you know? He said, I know every thought you think. Now that's quite something. You can imagine somebody at Duke University having an image there, concentrate, concentrate. And you're holding up an image of a tree and finally says, I see a ship, because it has a mast. And the professor says, good, you passed. He wasn't like that. He knew us from inside out. That was what drew me to him in the first place, that he knew me. And I never hid from him. I figured if I'm wrong, I want him to know it, because he can correct that error. I'm not attached to my errors. Some people used to regret that he understood them. I was glad. But it was so wonderful. Again and again, he would point things out to me. I've often told another story about where there was a young man in the Hollywood church, just a member of the congregation, and not a very sincere member, and he was just one of those people who talk a lot and do very little. And I happened to mention that I was going to give the class on Wednesday, and he said, oh, I'll be sure to be there. And I knew he wasn't sincere. I knew he probably would be there, but I knew that nothing meant very much to him. So I, very ungracefully, I don't say ungraciously, but ungracefully, said, would you please check people's pockets so that they don't bring any fruits to throw? I only wanted to put away and pay no attention and accept and not give him the impression that I had accepted this, what he wanted me to think was a compliment. Anyway, I was again with Master after dinner a few days later after lunch, and the guests had left and we were sitting together, and he said, oh, by the way, when you're with people, don't talk about fruits and vegetables. That's he said, that's not very dignified. All his correction basically was how to teach other people and how not to teach other people. And I've been very grateful to it. He wanted me to take myself more seriously than I ever could and ever have. I'm sorry I haven't followed him in this particularly or properly. But I remember one time I asked him, sir, you keep calling me Walter, and the other boys call me Don. Would you rather they called me Don or Walter? He said very seriously, he said, they should call you Reverend Walter. So I backed off from that in a hurry. I never asked him to do that. But then he went on, he said, it's not that one is more important than another, but in an army you have to have generals and captains and lieutenants and soldiers. You have to accept your position. I have never accepted my position. That's my failing. but we just have to be who we are. And Master did his best, and I think in this he sort of failed. But I'd rather be a friend to everybody. Anyway, the poor you have always with you, but remember that the poor means above all. I've seen so many people who had very little, and yet when you look in their eyes, they have God. Or they have joy, they have peace. That's a greater riches than any kind of money in the bank. So don't place your security in that. I have seen again and again that when I didn't have what I needed, it was given to me, often in inexplicable ways. Another story I've always loved is back in 1972. I wanted to go to India. I felt Divine Mother wanted me to go to India. And I didn't have the money, but somehow people gave it, and I had a little bit from classes, so I had enough money to go for 2 months and come back. That was it. And I was in San Francisco a couple of weeks before I was to go, and the rod on my car was whatever it is that you do with rods on the car, and it wouldn't function anymore. And I knew that I had no choice but to get another car. To repair that car, they told me, would cost as much as another used car would. So I realized I'd have to get a car. But if I paid for a new car, even a new used car, I wouldn't have the money to go to India. And I felt Divine Mother wanted me to go to India. Well, I didn't have a church I could go to. I didn't have anywhere to go. The only thing I had to go to was a restaurant. So a few of us went to this restaurant and talked about it. And you can't really get divine answers in a restaurant. I mean, you can, but I didn't. And, and so at the end I had to say, well, Divine Mother, I don't have any solution. I don't have an answer from you. My common sense, however, tells me that I have to come back from India. And when I come back, I will need a car because I live up there in the mountains, and without a car, I couldn't function properly. So my common sense tells me that I need a car. But if you still want me to go to India, you're going to have to reimburse me. That may not be the way most people pray. It's the way I prayed. So this was Friday evening. I placed, I think it was $1,100 on a good used car. Friday evening. The next Monday morning, I received a letter in the mail from somebody I'd never heard of. And in the letter, it said, use this check as Divine Mother wants you to. Now, how many people in this country, and writing to a complete stranger, would say, as Divine Mother wants you to? He might have said, as God wants you to. He said, as Divine Mother wants you to. The check was for $1,000. And so I was able to go. This has happened to me and to us at Ananda so many times. We have faith. People think we're pretty dumb, but somehow we always come out on top in the end. And so many efforts have been made to drown us, and yet nobody has ever succeeded, because God wants this work to go forward. You know, Master, again and again, in fact, I suspect, and I can't go through them numerically and make sure, but it was so often as to make me think it was every time he spoke in public. He spoke about the need for communities like this one, where people live together for God, work together for God, and he would have people affirm this concept, this ideal. And in Beverly Hills in 1949, there was a garden party. Well, you know what garden parties are like, especially in a wealthy town like Beverly Hills. This was a very wealthy family, and you know what they would expect when he was asked to get up and speak. Thank you, the gracious hostess, and thank you for everybody, and thank you for coming, and it's been a wonderful afternoon. I hope you've enjoyed it, and so on. Oh. I was slightly almost embarrassed the way he spoke. It was so completely out of tune with the gathering. He was shouting with such fervor. He gave a talk so powerful, more powerful than any other lecture I have ever heard. And he tried to inspire people to start communities. And he said, thousands of youths must go north, south, east, west, everywhere to spread this ideal of simple living, plain living, God high thinking. I was slightly embarrassed because they never did invite him back. Didn't surprise me at all. But he said afterwards, God spoke through me, and I knew that was the case. And God is not a respecter of time or circumstance. And in all that crowd, there were at least 800 people there. Only I started a community. And when I heard that talk, I vowed that I would do my best to make this ideal a reality. I remember in 1958, I said to Dayamata, when are we going to start communities? Her answer was, frankly, I'm not interested. Well, okay, that wasn't their mission, but I knew it was mine. And I am so grateful that God has made this possible. Don't think I did it. I just was the willing slave. I did my best, yes, we've all done our best. But it's such an amazing thing. What a struggle it has been. It was not easy. We didn't have any money. I didn't have any money. My father had money, but he never gave me any money. Not for this. But somehow it came. I slightly scolded Divine Mother. I said, you know I don't want money. You don't know. I don't even like it. Why are you making me work so hard to earn money just so I can build these buildings? And yet I found at the end of it, when we passed that test, and we had everything we needed, and the community got off to a good start, and then other people came in, and finally it became a community effort, not just my effort to get it started. I found that what my gain was not the money to do these things. It was inner strength. When you do what God wants you to do, and you can feel it in your heart to some extent, I knew I had to do it. And no matter how many difficulties, and so many people were counseling me, it's too hard, that means God doesn't want it. I said if he didn't want it, he would make it impossible, but he's making it barely possible, so I have to keep trying. And the thing is that it did happen. And I think this is a miracle. And to have so many people coming from so many places, we have thousands of friends all over the world. It's a great fulfillment for me. It's a wonderful thing to see that so many people have taken his message and understood how they can apply it and the importance of applying it in their own lives. So, the poor you have always with you, but me you have not always. Me, after all, Christ lived 2,000 years ago. Yogananda passed away in 1952. And whatever you get from me, I'm going into India. It's in your hearts that you've got to look. That inspiration of God's presence in your hearts. When you get it, and it doesn't come always, but when you do, hang on to it. It's the most priceless treasure you can have. Hang on to any feeling of love, any feeling of joy, any feeling of the divine. Go off to yourself. Go off in the woods. Don't think, as I have done in the beginning, I don't do it now, but I used to do it. I used to think, oh, it's so natural that I don't need to hang on to it. It'll always be with me, but it won't be always with you. Until you make yourself his friend, he will then become your friend. When you live for him, he will show that he's always lived for you. But you know, you've been turning your back on him for so many incarnations. Why should he come running just because you say, please come to me? He wants to be sure. But when you've passed your tests, when you've shown that in all troubles and trials, under all difficulties, you still love him. Can you hear me? Then he will come. And two beautiful passages in the Gita. One is in the 2nd chapter where Krishna speaks to Arjuna as if smiling. It takes a lot of sincerity to win that smile outwardly. But as I said in my song, love is a magician. I knew all the time. No, how was it? I knew all the while. Oh, come on, somebody tell me. I know it perfectly well. Love is all I know, sun rays on the snow. I can't sing that song. I can't sing it, it moves me too deeply. But I knew all the while that your smile was with me. And that is what also the Gita says. And when his smile is there, that shows that you've advanced. When you're aware of that smile, he's always smiling. And I would look into my Guru's eyes, and when he was scolding even, I would see there was no scolding in his eyes. There was only love and support and hope that I would understand and learn. So that is one thing. And another beautiful thing in the Gita is where Krishna speaks of himself, or Arjuna speaks of him as friend. Friendship with God is in some ways the most beautiful. Even as the Divine Mother, there's a certain obligation in that kind of love. This is my child, I have to help him. But a friend doesn't have to help you. He helps you because he wants you, because he's one with you. So I would suggest that even if you think of God as Lord, Almighty, God knows what else, or as Father, or as Mother, think of him also as friend. He's on your side. He wants you to win. And all he's doing is waiting for you who have turned your back on him for millions of years to finally turn back and say, Lord, I am thine. Thou art mine. Joy to you.